Hello. Well, I wanted to talk to you about people using children for political and spiritual gain. But there are two reasons for doing that, and some is political ambition, and there's another reason as well. I think it was Jonathan Haidt who said something about sacrifice. I'm not sure it was Haidt though, but I tried to find the quote, but I can't. But whoever said it, it was this. You don't get people's loyalty by bribing them with good things. For sure, it works temporarily, but actually it doesn't last. It lasts only about as long as the good things last. When they run out, so does the loyalty. No, you get loyalty to a creed or a belief or a person or a god that lasts. The loyalty will last when it demands that people sacrifice things, either to you or to the creed or to the God you say you serve. And whoever wrote that was absolutely right. In ancient times, people were told to sacrifice their firstborn sons, weren't they? That's the most precious thing they would ever have. It's their future. And, of course, there is no love that anyone normal can have that's that could be any stronger than the love for your child. And people sacrifice these children to the god Baal. Well, after you've done that, after you've taken your happy little baby, after you've torn him from his mother's breast and then seen him butchered on an altar, after you've done that, because you were told that by so doing you're confirming your service to Baal, and you'll ensure the better future for the prosperity of your tribe, then after you've done that, are you going to tell yourself that it was all in vain? That you wasted your child's life? Are you going to say you were wrong? You can't do that. You are confirmed in your loyalty by that very act, by giving up something so precious. How could you possibly admit, even to yourself, even in your darkest hours, that you were wrong in the way you'd acted with regard to your child? Now, there are other things, if you've sacrificed your life, for instance, as a priest to the church, how could you admit years later that you've thrown up your chance of family, of children, and of an individual, independent existence for no purpose whatsoever? You can't do that. If you're a communist living in Siberia, how could you admit even to yourself that you have embraced a creed with whatever fingers you've got left that haven't dropped off from frostbite, that you've embraced a creed that brings misery in its trail to millions, and by your support you're facilitating that? You can't. It would mean your life, in all three of those cases, it would mean your life is not only worth nothing, but it's worth minus nothing. No, if you sacrifice your child or your future or yourself, the only way you can maintain your self-respect is by doubling down and insisting that it was all worthwhile, and that it was all right and true, because there's some higher purpose behind it or something. I was put in mind of that when Dave Merritt, father of Jack Merritt, made his outburst. I'll get to that. Jack Merritt is the poor kid who was butchered by a not-so-reformed jihadist on London Bridge a couple of weeks ago. It seemed to me that Mr. Merritt is the sort of well-meaning, socially just man who brought up his children well, to work for society, to be aware of social problems, to try to help. And there isn't anything wrong with that. But the fact that Mr. Merritt saw fit to tear into Boris Johnson at a time of his greatest grief seems to me to be the reaction of someone who was trying to hide a heretical thought from himself that had slipped into his upper consciousness, and the sort of reaction of somebody who felt that the only way to drown out such a heretical thought was to do a lot of shouting and political accusations. The heretical thought in this case being, did I bring up my son so socially conscious that I actually encouraged him to be in harm's way, and so it's my fault? No, it's never your fault, Mr. Merritt. It was Uthman's fault. Uthman, whatever he was called. But of course, there's that nagging thought which would happen quite naturally to anyone, and you had to drown it out by ripping into Boris Johnson. What did Boris Johnson say? Did he say, oh, all Muslims are terrorists and deserve to be hanged from the nearest lamppost? No, he didn't. Actually, he didn't. But from Mr. Merritt's reaction, you'd think that was what he had said. As a matter of fact, what Johnson said was that there had to be a change in sentencing laws and that automatic release would have to be stopped. He didn't say no release at all. He said automatic release. That is, however bad somebody is at 8 years or whenever it is, he has to be let out, whatever his state of mind. And that's perfectly reasonable. Frankly, if I were on the wrong end of a kitchen knife, being wielded by someone who was determined to die and was equally determined to take me along with him, then the fact that this man was out and about because he'd been given automatic release might run through my mind as being somewhat inadvisable, possibly with that the thought running through my mind would be even more passionate than that voiced in the calm and reasonable written words set down by Mr. Johnson. I think it was the Daily Mail that his article was appeared in. But while Mr. Merritt was using his dead son as a tool for making a political point, and he was, although, you know, when you lose your son, you're going to be a bit unbalanced, so maybe there's a good reason for it. It seemed to me, though, a bit rich that he was accusing Mr. Johnson of doing that very thing. Then, hot on the heels of Mr. Merritt's undignified outburst about what his late son would or would not have liked, we got the story once more put about by the parent of the child on the hospital floor in Leeds. I want to tell you that once I took one of my sons to hospital after he'd had a collision with the corner of a metal filing cabinet, and he had a gash on his forehead that was, like most head injuries, bleeding copiously. This was during a time when the Labour government were running things, and I sat with my son for 5 or 6 hours, holding a series of cotton wads against the wound while drunken patients reeled about the A&E, shouting at each other and abusing the staff. It's not just the Conservatives who can't keep up with the numbers of people who turned up in emergency departments of hospitals after the pubs close. In the case of the kid on the floor, I'm quite prepared to believe that they did wait all that time, but I'm not prepared to believe that he was treated on the floor. If you put a kid on the floor in a hospital, you would be told straight away to get that kid off the floor. Anything left on the floor is a trip hazard, and floors are hardly the most hygienic places of any building, and if that kid had to lie down and there was no trolley available, by the way, there's a photo. You can see part of the trolley right next to the child. So my suspicions is that the trolley was available after all, and that the parents took him off for that photo. But even if the trolley were not, you could rig up some sort of a bed by putting 2 chairs together, couldn't you? No, the floor was a means of using the child to further a political message. And once again, I'm quite sure that the parents, who certainly risked their child's health by lying him on the floor in that way, they probably still consider themselves to be filled with the light of the greater good by what they'd done. Actually, I just thought of it. They were following the deeds of their dear leader, weren't they, who also staged a sitting on the floor stunt in a train a year or so ago. I have some photos because I made a video about it, so I'll put them up here probably. Let's see. You see, I did say Corbyn is not only a liar, but he's a silly liar as well. He lies in situations where his stories can be so easily disproved. He was on a Virgin train. He said that because the Conservatives were no good, the train was, he used the words ram-packed, which is actually wrong. It should be jam-packed. The train was so full there was no sitting room, and he had to sit on the floor. And there were photos of him looking mournful sitting on the floor. But you see, Virgin have CCTV in their trains, and as soon as this story came out, Virgin released a series of photos showing Corbyn getting up, walking down the corridor along a load of empty seats, and then going to his reserved seat where he sat down. He's just a stupid liar. I mean, as I said, politicians all are liars. They have to be. That's actually part of the job description, but in this case, he is a bad liar. Anyway, yeah, so you will have seen the photos now because I'll seek them out and I'll put them up here. And then let's go on to another child being used for political purpose. That's Greta Thunberg, whose parents are the most successful and cynical child users of them all. Miss Thunberg is now Time magazine's Person of the Year. Why her? How about all those people who are being shot by French police in their protests against French governmental arrogance? How about those people who are being shot by Chinese police in their protests against China's dictatorial ambitions over Hong Kong? What about those people being shot by Iranian police in their protests against the oppression of the Ayatollahs? And yeah, how about Asia Bibi? Yeah, she spent 10 years under sentence of death in a Pakistani prison for being a Christian. And I'm sure we're all quite sure that Pakistani prisons are no holiday camps, and certainly not for a Christian. And she stubbornly stuck to her Christian faith regardless, and much to my shame, and to the shame of everybody in this country, she was refused asylum in the United Kingdom, and they shoved her off to Canada, I think. That's a disgrace. That is the Person of the Year. Oh no, but Thunberg's the one. And why? Because she fulfills a political agenda. And when she crashes in some way from the pressure put on her by her parents and all the people surrounding her, I'm sure her family will convince themselves that they did it for the planet and that they did the correct thing. And the more you criticise them, the louder they will shout about it to drown out what's going in their own heads. And their sacrifice was good and right and worthwhile. Mind you, in their case, it wouldn't surprise me if they actually had more true love for the family dog. But then, that's just my opinion. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.